Good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is when you are watching our first podcast from the series Disinfo Resilience Network, where I want to introduce a couple of very interesting people. And our first guest is Heidi Cuda from the United States, who is a very experienced journalist, and she also has I think a lot of experience in investigative journalism, and she also knows about agents of influence and all the stuff that I'm very interested in. So thank you very much for being with us, Heidi. Please introduce yourself better than I can do it.
Oh, you did a great job. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, Heidi Siegmund Cuda. You'll find my work at bettedangerous.com, Bette. You'll also find my work in Byline Times and Byline Supplement, reader-funded a reader-funded newspaper out of the UK that really kind of rose to the occasion in this period of grave deception. I also co-host a YouTube podcast called Radicalized Truth Survives, which is a investigative show about disinformation. Again, many of us, much like Dietmar, I know, had to kind of rise to the occasion when we sort of understood the world we were dealing with and this new type of warfare we were dealing with. So yeah, but I've been an investigative producer since college, and I've worked for major networks and also major print newspapers. So that's me.
What do you think about the current situation? I mean, the world situation in because I think it's not so different than many people think. If we compare Europe and the United States, we have all this populism, and we have the influence by one major power, especially the Russian Federation and the Putin regime, who tries to use proxies, but also their own narratives and propagandas directly via social media, but not only via social media. How was 2016 for you, to be more specific?
Very painful. I knew on September 17th of 2016 that Trump was going to win. The reason that I knew that is that my mentor in investigative reporting told me he was going to. He said, one word, he said, charisma. And I thought, how could that be possible when I had investigated Trump on and off, starting in the 90s and then intensively in the mid 2000s. And then I also saw that he was using the vocabulary of misogyny. And as a woman, I'm now 60, I lived through the 80s. I lived through all that patriarchal, greed is good period of the 80s. And I knew this was going to be very painful if we didn't stop it. And he was a pageant owner. So somebody who rated women on a scale of 0 to 10. So I my first anti-Trump blog, and I went from being a very kind of popular locally media personality in Los Angeles and Southern California to just crickets. And I was like, this is going to be bad. This is going to be bad. Something is going on and it's not right. We were on the brink of having our very first woman president, which was going to be something very joyful for women and hopefully men who appreciate smart women. And it just obviously didn't turn out that way. So 2016, even though it's 8 years ago, it feels very, very close to me because of all the investigating I've done. And I know we'll talk about some of that in the past 8 years, because the same players who collaborated with Russia to attack the minds of Americans in 2016 are still doing it again, using some of the same techniques and some more advanced techniques. But yeah, 2016 was we have not come to terms with 2016, which I believe was the greatest crime in American history, and we haven't come to terms with it. And, people who were part of that crime are still walking free.
When you speak about 2016, what we saw back then was, first of all, a huge campaign orchestrated by Russia, social media campaign especially, in favor of one candidate, let's put it like that. And what also was similar to these elections in 2016, that there was a candidate called Jill Stein. And Jill Stein, for the viewers who don't know her, is the candidate of the Green Party, but it cannot be compared in any way to the Green Party in European countries. She was a special guest at the 2015 Russia Today show, and she has leftists but extremely strong anti-establishment votes, and she's connected to conspiracy theories. I think that's completely valid to say. But there is one more thing about her, that she's a kind of spoiler candidate to pull some lefties away from the polls or to distract people. And what do you think about her role? I mean, we do not suspect anything about her connection to Russia. So, but what kind of effect does she have?
Well, I think all you really need to know, your viewers need to know, is that the KKK just endorsed Jill Stein. So
But
throughout,
sorry to interrupt. I
yes,
saw this, but at least she refused to accept this.
it doesn't. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter. She sat at a table with Vladimir Putin in 2015. We have seen these people over and over again, and in fact, often networked with the same people. In American recent history, spoiler candidates, ghost candidates, these things are not really new. Roy Cohn and Roger Stone, Roy Cohn was a lawyer who mentored Donald Trump and Roger Stone and Paul Manafort. He was also a mob lawyer. He helped, navigate a spoiler candidate during the Reagan era. So this type of activity is not necessarily new, but the ramifications of what Jill Stein has done, I would say we haven't seen anything quite on this scale before, because in 2016, Jill Stein votes were the difference in Donald Trump gaining the White House. So there were maybe 40,000 votes here, 40,000 votes here in 3 states that then went to Donald Trump, swing states that ultimately are what gave him the White House. So it's very, very serious. And, a vote for, we often say a vote for Donald Trump is a vote for Vladimir Putin. A vote for Jill Stein is a vote for Vladimir Putin. We have seen these people over and over again. They span, different sides of the political spectrum. Some people are still attracted to that, third position of somebody that they think might just burn it down. But this is not the period of time to, dignify Jill Stein with your vote. It's an incredibly dangerous thing to do.
I mean, I find it very interesting. Today, I was walking by a university in Vienna, and there was this poster of a kind of communist party, social revolutionary party, and they wrote about international politicians. The first interesting thing is that they criticized a lot of them, but not Vladimir Putin. He was not mentioned. Yeah, they left him out. But they criticized not only Trump, but also Joe Biden. And their message was basically, it's all the same. Yeah. And because they are all capitalists, and they are these democratic capitalists, they called, so they had a clear anti-democracy message, even very openly. And in Europe, it's more common than in the United States, as far as I know. But when we speak about Tankies, I think it is very interesting that, first of all, they somehow, in many cases, support also the far right candidates or their visions, also in Europe, because they like the pro-Russian views traditionally. And on the other hand, they have a very problematic worldview themselves. They're Stalinist and they support China or Iran. What kind of experiences do you have in the last, I would say during the 80s? What kind of bad surprises do you have with Tankies? Did
Well,
you have?
it's something that I think people still don't understand enough because we call it the horseshoe. And in that horseshoe, what you see is those on the extreme right and those on the extreme left are actually aligning. And that is something that when you understand information warfare, that it can be very much masqueraded. People might not understand that an organization that's preaching peace and love and harmony might actually be propped up by Russia. Excuse me. You taught me that. We have a wonderful podcast that you and I did explaining the history of the peace movement. Before we specifically get to Tankies, though, I want to give you the numbers on how Jill Stein swayed the election in 2016 for Donald Trump, because I think it's very important that people actually hear it. Hillary Clinton lost Wisconsin to Trump by 22,000 votes. Stein carried 31,000 votes. Michigan, Clinton lost to Trump by 10,000 votes. Stein carried 51,000 votes. Ditto for Pennsylvania, where Trump won by 44,000 votes and Stein pulled 49,000 votes. Had Clinton carried just those 3 states, she would have been president. And I wanted just to throw that in there because people keep thinking that the popular vote will go in the coming election to Kamala Harris. And I hope that that is true. I hope that there are enough sane people still left in our country. But what it's going to come down to is a handful of votes in a handful of states. So we cannot afford to have a single ballot cast for Jill Stein. So I just wanted to clarify that because I think a lot of people don't understand how it actually works in America with our electoral college. And those numbers to me are just a bit terrifying. Tankies, oh my God. We have so many degrees of tankies. Bottom line is that we have them online and they, pretend to be leftist, but ultimately they are there, as we have found out, and it has often been revealed, where they're actually part of an influence campaign or an influence operation to try to sway people against democratic governance. And really, when you look at the extremes of both parties and the fringe of both parties, the outcome for me is always the same. It's like you're basically pushing people to be foot soldiers for fascism, but you're carrying a different narrative around as kind of your bag of tricks. So,
So now you remind, what you're saying that recently we spoke about Tulsi Gabbard. I spell her name completely wrong. Can you help me out, please?
Tulsi Gabbard, you did just fine.
Okay,
And,
not so bad.
speaking of tankies and speaking of Jill Stein,
And she used to be a Democrat, and quite, and I find it very interesting because every time somebody in Europe criticized the US system, then I explain to people, okay, there are only 2 really relevant parties, but within these parties are very, very huge varieties of ideologies and everything. But I realized we have it even in Austria, even in our small parties, we have also wings. Yeah? In the Social Democrats, you have people who really love America, transatlantic relations. And then you have people who are tankies, basically, yeah, who want Jill Stein and who like Jill Stein and Orban and Trump and everything. Yeah, I got everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the Bernie Bros. That's where I was like trying to go. I mean, that was basically what the Bernie Bros was. And what's interesting is that, again, real people, have good reason to be disenfranchised or to feel disenfranchised about aspects of democratic governance. America has been an imperfect country from the beginning, but we can always upgrade. We can always do better. We can always, move toward a more perfect union. But what the message is coming from Tankies, coming from the various cults that form around some of these, people that we just mentioned, is that if your idea is just to burn it down, then again, that kind of destruction doesn't allow room for actually building that more perfect union. And I feel bad that celebrities and academics and comedians have all been engaged to push people in these extreme direction. These are real people who believe real things. But the bottom line is that, we're on the precipice of potentially destroying 250 years of a democracy. That's no
Okay,
small thing.
you mentioned something extremely important. I don't want to talk about the celebrities because they are crazy everywhere, and as artists, they are somehow allowed. But you mentioned academics, and they worry me the most. So I just want to repeat. You were talking about people who push people to the extremes and away from our democratic system. And we are talking about academics, we're talking about professors. And this is so interesting because these are basically the people that we should trust the most. And that makes it so dangerous because I think a troll, online troll, who doesn't even have a profile picture and no name as well, it's not dangerous because you say, okay, I have my shield up. I know this is some trolling, so I don't take it quite serious. But when you're a student and you're sitting in a university and you get this ideology, then I think it's much more impactful also. So what can we do about these academics? I mean, sometimes they act very subtle. We cannot even, please don't mention any names because they will sue us all. But we know whom we're talking about, and they are traveling around. They are also coming to Austria, by the way, also the Americans. Everyone understands English, and then they can spread their narratives.
So I learned from you that, 1,000 trolls online, equals maybe one academic with a name running around the world, preaching pro-Kremlin narratives. Again, cloaked in different narratives, but ultimately the same is it benefits Putin, it's anti-Ukraine, and it's anti-democracy. I think that list of names has got to be released. And the list I'm talking about. We just learned in a 277-page affidavit that the current iteration of the IRA, the SDA, which is an influence operation in Russia that goes straight to Putin. You can draw a line straight to Putin. They follow 2,800 people who are academics, influencers, social media, names, as well as, comedians who actually do have quite an impact. We need those names so at least we can begin exposing some of these people. I think it's pretty easy to know who they are. Our mutual friend, you probably know Pekka. He has a list, his Vatnik soup list. You can type a name in there. You can see if somebody's been doing the work of the Kremlin and for how long, and when there may have been a transition between being a kind of a normal politician or a normal academic, all of a sudden becoming very, very pro-Russian and pro-Putin. There's usually a period
The
of
problem
where
is that
where thing happens.
even if you have all this information, you have the narratives, you know that they appeared in Russia today, or even at the Russian state propaganda channels, people still say, yeah, but whatever. Yeah? Until it's proven that the person received money from Kremlin-linked oligarchs, like in one example in Germany, and it's finally, I mean, the radicals will still follow such people. Yeah? So this is for me
I think it is, what I was going to say is I think it is our job to not only apply pressure with the communities that we work with, but also in our work to do as much exposure as possible. You're right. I don't work in counterintelligence. I'm not part of a 3-letter agency that might have the records or be able to follow the money trail. And that example of the German filmmaker and author who did multiple Putin, pro-Putin books that you directed me to, that's a very important example. Because when you do see that somebody has taken 600,000 euros and didn't even tell their publisher, that actually casts the kind of shade that you need to discredit that person's work. And I'm going to guess that they're not being booked on as many talk shows as they probably were. So I think it's very important. And here in America, we just had, a groundbreaking, indictment where 2 RT employees were indicted in a covert operation worth $10 million, where funding went to a Tennessee-based media company and a half a dozen popular YouTube influencers. It was revealed to have taken millions of dollars from this Russian covert influence operation, which, according to our intelligence agencies, is linked to Russian military intelligence. And why I bring that up is because the State Department has just stated, as of early September, that a Russian covert influence operation is not journalism. I say that very slowly because we've never had 6 words to help us cut through all of this. It's censorship, it's First Amendment. No, a covert influence operation designed to push people away from democratic governance is not journalism. And I say that because, as you know, Dietmar, one of the issues that I have is that Rumble, which was funded by Peter Thiel and JD Vance, who is running for vice president in America under Trump, they still platform RT when RT has been exposed to be an influence operation. They still platform this company that I'm talking about in Tennessee, Tenet Media. So they are still also platforming these influencers who we know have been paid millions of dollars by the Russians. And Elon Musk on his X Twitter platform is also platforming these people that were just revealed to take money from the Russians. So it is, there's a real inflection point. There's this real crises happening because we have the awareness now, but we're kind of like, where's the action? Where's the action? Where's it going to come from? We know that it's not free speech or journalism to platform Russian influence operations, but we have not yet seen anybody but the Russians get indicted for it so far. So far, the Americans have not been indicted. However, it took 2 years when the last operation was revealed. There was somebody named Alexander Ionov who was paying Americans on both the left and the right, so paying the Tankies and paying the MAGA extremists to disrupt elections and to create, fake and staged events. It took 2 years for the people who took the money from the Russians to actually be indicted and convicted. So unfortunately, things move a little bit slower than we would like them to move, but we are starting to find the right words and be able to kind of have better framing for some of these things that you and I know have been happening that are part of this larger global war on the West.
I find it very interesting that you mentioned what the state could do, for instance, or what the platforms could do, deplatforming people with a questionable background, also finance-wise. But I want to go back to the main problem that the lists are not released. And I think I thought about it before the recording when I had a walk outside. It's so strange that we have all these intelligence agencies, yeah, very powerful, very smart ones. I mean, at least in the United States or in the UK, and they care a lot about the secrets that can get stolen. But they don't care about the disinformation and the propaganda that comes in. So if you're a spy, they care about you. But if you're an agent of influence, maybe it seems boring to them or not dangerous, or there's no awareness, still not enough awareness how these subversive activities. I mean, there are some documentaries, but only on YouTube, a few free. I think I saw all of them. In Austria we don't have any, but in the US from the 80s, where they were discussing active measures by the KGB.
Yes.
And now we lack the discourse. The media doesn't care, and the intelligence services don't care enough, in my opinion.
So I think the issue, and this may be the same in Europe, when I first started investigating what was really happening in 2016, I didn't realize that it was global. I was looking at it from an American perspective. And then my friends in Britain said, no, we had the same thing with Brexit. And my friends, from the Czech Republic saying, we're dealing with some of this here. And, all around, I started making allies from Italy and various Baltic countries. Former president of Estonia said, hey, we were ground zero. You start to piece it all
2016.
together. And so I think what we are seeing in America is factions within our agencies. We have a real issue in America where you can retire as the head of the FBI, and then you can go work for a K Street lobbyist, where you then end up representing an oligarch like Oleg Deripaska or Semyon Mogilevich. So what if you are in the department and you see that your ex-boss is now working for the Russian mobster that is part of how these things get funded? You might just keep your head down and say, I don't necessarily want to take on what I see right in front of me, which is that Russia has blanketed America with information warfare, and that we have some bad actors on the payroll. So maybe that could be one part of it. I think another piece of it is simply that because we have this First Amendment, which is a wonderful thing to have to be in a country where you can speak freely and speak truth to power. I think there's been some confusion over how to deal with what is happening online. We have various ways that tech oligarchs were given a pass, where it was like, well, they're not responsible. Well, I think that we are seeing signs and glimmers of light, where we certainly saw that in France, when they arrested the head of Telegram, they were saying there's criminal activity happening on your platform. You are going to be held accountable. That was a big moment. And you saw the response from a number of oligarchs in America, where they were kind of on their back foot for a minute. And I do actually think somebody like Elon Musk is scared if Trump doesn't win. If Trump wins, he's going to be fine, right? Trump's not going to prosecute somebody whose platform has been used to engage in narrative warfare on his behalf. Obviously, Musk has done everything to promote, MAGA, the MAGA cult, what I call him, on his platform. So, but you put a prosecutor in the White House who's young and vibrant and may start cleaning house at some of the three-letter agencies. And maybe we're going to start to be able to look at how we can actually seal some of these vulnerabilities we have in America, how we can do some of the deep structural reforms that we need to do. We have given hostile foreign nations access to the minds of our citizens freely, and we've done nothing about that. Other countries have seen that that's not a good move, and they start inoculating children against information warfare and how to understand propaganda and lies from a very early age. We have not been inoculated in America, and we need to do better. And I look at what's happened in the last decade as the equivalent of like some sort of radioactive snow that's just been blanketing countries nonstop, kind of a digital carpet bombing is what one of my podcast partners, Jim Stewartson, calls it. And we've done nothing to help people or inoculate people or warn people. And I know that we can do better. And if we can have a good outcome in November, for me, that would be, continuing democratic governance through Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And I think we can start to deal with some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a global challenge for all democracies that should stick together to a certain kind of degree. Beside all the competition that makes democracy a democracy, and all the freedom of speech that makes us unique in the world for our values, and but it's also a vulnerable part
Yeah.
that we need to protect, because it's like an open wound, which needs to be cleaned sometimes. I mean, it's a stupid metaphor,
No,
but
you're absolutely
uh,
right. You're absolutely right. We have a, we are being targeted. Our freedoms are being targeted by nations that do not have our freedoms. So, when Russia infiltrates the West, they're taking advantage of freedoms that we have that they do not provide in their own country.
I mean, I liked our discussion yesterday, especially when I saw the American flags. I saw this fellow with the American flags, and her name was Dee. She said democracy warrior. And I think this is a term that fits very much. We have a very tough, like I said, I'm repeating myself, it's a very tough security topic we are speaking about. And it's a shame that the far right, or even the normal right wingers in many cases are not on board, that they are the so-called patriots are not acting patriotic at all. Instead, even amplifying the narratives of hostile countries. So how ridiculous is this if you think about it? They don't even stick to their so-called agenda, which they don't follow at all anymore.
Well, what they don't realize is that the lies that I'm talking about and that you are talking about that have blanketed their homes, their communities, their minds, those lies are actually being weaponized to get people to overthrow their own democratic countries. And so those lies that push them into fear, into thinking that a strong man is the only one that can save them, they don't realize that they've become foot soldiers for fascism. They think they're patriots. Their entire political, their entire politics is now to own the libs, because as you know, the libs have been now branded as communists, something they don't understand anything about, but they hear it over and over again. And my decades of being an investigative reporter are now really informed by a lot of research and a lot of books I've been reading about history, World War II in particular, Weimar Germany, really in particular. And it's like these same techniques, fake racist lies, fake narratives around immigrants, they were all used in the 20s and 30s in Germany. So the people who are creating this MAGA cult and also the QAnon cult, which has merged with the MAGA cult, they are using techniques that are cruel and effective from a playbook that is cruel and effective. And so they don't know that they are foot soldiers for fascism. They think they are the real Americans and the real patriots. And the only way we can bring them back is by removing them from that information intake. And
Yeah. So we were just interrupted for one moment, but you wanted to tell us what's the way to get radicalized people back.
so, particularly with older adults, what's been successful is removing them from the radicalizing element, taking Fox away from them, taking talk radio that is designed to radicalize people toward an extreme outcome, changing the channel, getting them off of email lists. There are ways. My friend Jen Sanko did a brilliant film called The Brainwashing of My Dad. And her father, who'd been a liberal man who never had an unkind word to say about anybody, started listening to Rush Limbaugh, started watching Fox. he was outraged farmed, and he became angry and racist and bigoted. And it's a lot of what we see today.
I just have an additional question for our European viewers who are not so detailed informed about American politics and media. Fox News changed in the last years. It became more extreme. And there was a guy who became famous there, even for the international audience, Tucker Carlson. But Tucker Carlson also had to leave Fox News. Can you tell us what happened, the official version at least?
There was a lawsuit. In that lawsuit, there was exposure that Tucker Carlson and some of the other anchors were knowingly lying to the American public, and were not fans of Trump or any of his close allies like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, a lawyer. And the lies, nevertheless, people, particularly around the big lie, which was that the election was stolen from Trump. So even for old Rupert Murdoch, they had to sort of sever their relationship with Tucker Carlson, who even for them had become a bit of a liability. But just to backtrack a little bit, Tucker Carlson's father had a contract with Orban's Hungary to do, pro-narrative work on Hungary. In that contract, Tucker Carlson had to platform some of Orban's goons on Fox. So this is something that is, again, when we can see it, when we know it, when you're like, why are they doing so much pro-Orban stuff, so much pro-Putin stuff? Well, once we can actually peel it back and learn why, I find it to be very helpful. Now, of course, Tucker Carlson is platformed on Elon Musk's X, where he interviews the most extremist, far-right, pro-Kremlin narrative makers that there are. So,
and recently, Roseanne.
That's what I can tell you about. That's what I can tell you. Yes.
What do you think about his interview with Roseanne?
I think Roseanne's brain is broken. I think that nobody is immune to influence operations. Nobody brainwashes themselves. A lot of women get pulled in by watching this, watching videos that basically show horrific things happening to young women or girls. And at some point their brain gets broken. And I think that Roseanne Barr probably somewhere along the line got broken and believes the stuff that she's saying. And again, whether they believe it, whether they're on the payroll, it doesn't really matter. The outcome is still the same. They're out there doing the work of the foot soldiers that are leading us down a path that may be irreversible.
So thank you very much for all your insights on what is happening in the US. I would really like to continue when we come closer to the elections. Maybe we do some kind of roundtable in this format with your colleagues and discuss the US elections when you all got very nervous already because it's only a couple of weeks, yeah?
Yes. And as my friend Ann Nelson says, she's done a lot of great work on following the money of all this stuff. My crystal ball is broken. So hers is broken, mine is broken. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I'm already planning
don't
be
worry,
at the inauguration.
I will not ask this question, and I will especially not ask it a couple of days before the election when you have half an hour for us. But during the last panel discussion from the Austrian American Society, they asked these questions, and it was very difficult for the panelists to answer. And they were, I don't know, and maybe, but if I'm pessimistic. So the only thing I can say that nobody was in favor of Donald Trump.
Yeah. Kamala Harris is going to win. I believe that that's going to happen. And I believe that Donald Trump is not going to acknowledge the victory, and there will be all kinds of crazy challenges, electoral challenges, and My hope is it does not end up at the Supreme Court. That is my concern. But we're going to find out in a few weeks what America is truly made of. And I plan to attend the first woman president inauguration 96 days from now. So that's my goal.
So thank you very much for your insights and looking forward to see you again. Have a good evening.
Thank you.